They laughed when she walked onto the field in a gray hoodie and running shoes. Just another weak instructor, they thought. So they pushed her down in the mud. Big mistake. What they didn't know was that Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell was a decorated Navy SEAL who'd survived hell itself. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun hung low over Riverside Military Academy, casting long shadows across the training field. The air was cold and sharp, carrying the smell of dew and discipline. Cadets stood in formation, boots aligned, faces blank with practiced confidence. Then, without ceremony, she appeared. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell walked onto the field wearing a gray hoodie, black cargo pants, and worn running shoes. No dress blues. No medals. No insignia. Just a woman in her early 30s with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and calm eyes that held something the cadets couldn't quite place. From the back row, someone muttered, "That's our new PT instructor?" Another voice snorted. "Looks like someone's personal trainer got lost." A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the formation. Sarah heard every word. Years in combat zones had sharpened her hearing to pick up whispers through wind, static, and gunfire. But she didn't react. She'd learned long ago that the loudest voices often belong to the least experienced. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Colonel Davis stood on the elevated platform, his voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. "Attention. This is Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, your new physical training instructor. For the next 8 weeks, you will give her the same respect you give every officer on this base. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir." The response was unified but carried an undertone of skepticism. Sarah stepped forward, clipboard in hand. Her voice was calm, measured, and carried an edge of quiet authority. "Good morning. We'll start simple today. 5-mile run, full gear. You have 2 minutes to suit up." Cadet Jake Reynolds, tall and broad-shouldered with the confidence of someone who'd never been truly tested, raised his hand. "Ma'am, the standard PT run is 3 miles. Are you sure you meant 5? Sarah's gaze met his. Steady. Unblinking. "I don't do standard, Cadet Reynolds. And since you're so eager to speak, you'll lead the formation. Now move." The smirk on Jake's face faltered for just a moment before he turned and jogged toward the equipment shed with the others. Whispers followed him. "She's trying to prove something. Bet she can't even finish 3 miles herself. This is going to be a joke." Within 2 minutes, the cadets were lined up, 40-pound packs strapped to their backs, rifles secured. Sarah stood beside them, her own pack in place. She didn't blow a whistle. Didn't shout a countdown. She simply started running. The pace was brutal from the start. By the first mile, the confident chatter had turned into heavy breathing and the rhythmic thud of boots on dirt. Sarah ran beside them, her stride smooth and efficient, her breathing controlled. She didn't look tired. She didn't even look challenged. Jake pushed himself harder, his competitive nature refusing to be shown up. Sweat darkened his collar. His lungs burned. But she stayed ahead, calm and relentless. By mile 2, Cadet Marcus Chin gasped out, "How is she not even breathing hard?" "She's bluffing," Jake panted. "She'll crash soon." But Sarah didn't crash. Her form remained perfect, compact, efficient, built from years of running through hostile terrain with far more weight than 40 pounds. By mile 3, the realization began to creep through the formation. She wasn't slowing down. She wasn't struggling. If anything, she looked like she could run another 10 miles without breaking a sweat. When they finally crossed the finish line at mile 5, half the cadets collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air, muscles trembling. Sarah stopped at the line, turned and waited. Her breathing was steady, controlled, barely elevated. "Recover," she said simply. "Strength training starts in 5 minutes." Marcus looked up at her, disbelief written across his mud-streaked face. "You're not even tired." Sarah's expression remained neutral. "I've run longer distances with heavier loads while being shot at, Cadet. This is a warm-up." Jake stood slowly, wiping sweat from his eyes, glaring up at her. "You trying to prove something, ma'am?" Sarah looked down at him. Not angry. Not smug. Just calm authority. "Nothing to prove, Cadet Reynolds. I already learned what you're still chasing." She glanced down the line at the exhausted faces and slumped shoulders. "Discipline isn't claimed. It's earned. Through pain, through failure, through getting back up." No one laughed this time. The next morning came with rain. Not a light drizzle, but a heavy, cold downpour that turned the training field into a mud pit. The kind of rain that soaks through everything and makes even concrete smell like earth. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the field, rain streaming down her face, clipboard tucked under one arm. She watched as the cadets assembled, their uniforms already drenched, their confidence from yesterday slightly diminished but their arrogance still intact. "Morning, ma'am," Jake said, his grin sharp. "I heard we're doing drills today. You sure you want to get that nice hoodie dirty?" His friend Marcus snorted. "Yeah, maybe we should do some indoor yoga instead." A ripple of nervous laughter rolled through the ranks. Sarah said nothing. She simply glanced at her watch, then back at them. "Since you're all awake enough to make jokes, we'll make it a 6-mile run. Full kit. Then low crawl drills." The laughter stopped immediately. "Ma'am, it's pouring rain," Jake protested. Sarah looked up at the sky briefly, rain hitting her face. "Then it's good training weather. Gear up." The cadets groaned as they shouldered their packs. Mud squelched beneath their boots as they started running. Sarah ran with them, same pace, same load, same silence. By the second mile, she was still breathing steadily. Jake wasn't. Sweat and rain streamed down his neck, mixing with the mud that splashed up from the ground. His earlier grin had completely vanished. Marcus muttered through clenched teeth, "She's not human. There's no way." "She's bluffing," Jake panted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Just trying to prove a point." Sarah heard both of them. She always did. She didn't react, just increased the pace slightly. The rain thickened, turning the dirt path into slippery sludge. Boots slipped, straps loosened, and tempers frayed. Sarah's form never changed. Her steps were deliberate, rhythm unbroken, eyes fixed forward like she was running toward something only she could see. By the time they finished the 6 miles, the field had turned into a brown river. Most of the cadets bent over, hands on knees, gasping for air. Sarah stood straight, rain washing some of the mud from her hoodie. "Drop your packs," she ordered. "Form up on the crawl line." A few heads jerked up in disbelief. "Ma'am," Jake started. "We're not done, cadet." The obstacle course had transformed into a muddy nightmare. Sarah pointed to the low-wire section. 60 yards of barbed wire stretched 2 feet off the ground over what was now essentially a shallow trench of cold water and mud. "Low crawl. Under the wire. If your back touches the wire, you start over. I'll demonstrate." She dropped to the ground without hesitation. What followed wasn't just a demonstration, it was a revelation. Sarah moved like liquid through the mud. Her elbows drove forward in perfect alignment, her hips stayed millimeters off the ground, her body carved through the muck with practiced efficiency. There was no wasted movement, no hesitation, no struggle. Just smooth, relentless forward motion. The kind of movement that didn't come from a training manual. It came from survival. She completed the 60 yards in under 90 seconds and stood at the far end, covered in mud, breathing normally. "Your turn," she called back. The cadets stared for a moment, then began. It was ugly from the start. Elbows slipped in the mud, backs arched too high and scraped against the wire, helmets caught on barbs. Frustration mounted with every yard. Halfway through the course, Jake deliberately drifted toward Sarah as she crawled alongside them, demonstrating technique to a struggling cadet. His shoulder accidentally bumped into her side, hard enough to knock her off balance. Her elbow slipped. Her chest hit the mud with a wet splat. Cold water rushed into her collar. A burst of laughter erupted from the formation. "Oops," Jake said, his voice bright with false innocence. "Sorry, ma'am. Slippery out here." More laughter followed. Someone whistled. Someone else muttered, "Guess she bleeds like the rest of us." Sarah didn't respond immediately. She pushed her hands flat into the mud and rose slowly, first to her forearms, then to her knees, then to her feet. Mud streamed off her in sheets, dripping from her chin and elbows. She didn't brush it away. She let it fall. Her eyes found Jake. The laughter died like someone had cut a wire. The field seemed to hold its breath. Rain ticked against helmets. Somewhere in the distance, a flag snapped in the wind. "Cadet Reynolds," Sarah's voice was quiet but carried across the field like a crack of thunder. "Front and center." Jake hesitated, then slogged forward through the mud until he stood before her. Up close, he could see the grit stuck in her eyelashes, the way her jaw was set, the absolute absence of anger in her eyes, which somehow made her more intimidating. "Do you think this is a joke?" she asked. Pride wrestled with uncertainty on Jake's face. "No, ma'am." "Good." Sarah nodded once. "Then you'll lead the next crawl. The entire formation will follow your pace and copy your technique. If you fail, everyone runs it again." A few nervous snickers bubbled up from the formation, quickly suppressed. Jake's jaw tightened. "Yes, ma'am." "But first," Sarah said, dropping back to the mud. Watch closely. What followed was a masterclass in movement. Sarah showed them where their wasted motion lived and how to eliminate it. Elbows tucked tight under shoulders, hands flat and pulling, not pushing. Forearms spearing forward, hips just millimeters off the ground, knees cutting narrow channels through the mud. Her body became a machine built from muscle memory and years of doing this under enemy fire. Rain hammered her back. Mud climbed her sleeves in clean bands. She slid past obstacles meant to snag, under wire meant to punish sloppy posture, through water that would drown a careless face. Her breathing never spiked. She didn't grunt or curse. She just worked. Your chin rides too high, she called out, eyes forward, voice level. That's how you catch a bullet in combat. Do it right or do it again. The mockery had completely evaporated. The cadets watched in silence, and for the first time they really saw her. Jake went prone and tried to match her technique. His elbows stabbed out too far, his hips swayed, his knees splashed too wide. He was strong, there was no question about that, but strength without technique is just noise. He lurched, sputtered, swore under his breath. The wire above him scraped against his helmet with a metallic zing. He flattened too fast, jammed his shoulder, swallowed mud. Sarah flowed past him like water around a rock. Tighter, cadet, she said without looking back. Tuck your elbows. Roll your weight forward, not sideways. Use the earth, don't fight it. Jake tried. He really tried. The formation watched as their cocky leader struggled through movements that looked effortless when Sarah did them. When he finally reached the end, muddy and exhausted, Sarah was already standing there, waiting. Again, she said simply. This time the whole formation follows you. Show them what you learned. Jake's face flushed. Whether from exertion or embarrassment, no one could tell. But he went back to the starting line without argument. This time he was better. Not perfect, but better. His movements were more controlled, his breathing more measured. And behind him, the entire formation followed, copying what he'd learned from copying Sarah. The rain continued to pour. The mud continued to cling. But something had shifted in the air, something intangible but undeniable. By the end of the drill, they were all covered head to toe in mud, trembling from cold and exhaustion. But the laughter was gone. In its place was something heavier, more substantial. Respect. Sarah faced the formation, mud dripping from every inch of her. This isn't punishment, she said, her voice carrying over the rain. It's instruction. If you treat it like punishment, you'll learn the wrong lesson. She paused, letting that sink in. Crawl lanes don't care about your ego. The wire doesn't care about your pride. And in combat, the ground doesn't care if you think you're too good to get dirty. You either learn to move right or you die wrong. The words landed like physical blows. Dismissed, she said. Clean your gear and be ready for 0600 tomorrow. As the cadets trudged back toward the barracks, Jake lingered for a moment, looking back at Sarah. She was walking toward the equipment shed, alone, still covered in mud. For the first time since meeting her, he wondered who she really was. That night, alone in her quarters, Sarah sat in silence. The rain continued to tap against the window in a rhythm that felt almost hypnotic. She'd showered, changed into civilian clothes, sweatpants and a navy t-shirt, and now sat at her small desk, staring at a locked metal box. The box was scratched and dented, carried from base to base, deployment to deployment for over a decade. She turned the key slowly. The click seemed loud in the quiet room. Inside, wrapped in a faded bandana, were two items. A Navy SEAL Trident patch, its gold dulled to bronze with age, and a photograph. 5 soldiers in desert combat gear, standing shoulder to shoulder against a backdrop of dust and ruin. They were filthy, exhausted, but grinning. In the center was Chief Petty Officer David Hawk Hawkins. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she lifted the photo. Hawk had been her swim buddy through BUD/S, her teammate through 3 deployments, her best friend through hell and back. Literally. He'd been the one who made her laugh when everything was falling apart. The one who always had her 6. The one who... The memory hit her like a physical blow. Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. 2019. The world was sand and fire. The air shook with the concussion of explosions that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Smoke so thick she could taste it. Gunfire like a symphony of death. Move. Move. Torres, move. Hawk's voice over the comms, rough and urgent. They'd been ambushed during an extraction. Bad intel from a local source. A setup from the start. The road out was gone, blocked by a burning vehicle. The team pinned down behind the crumbling walls of a compound. Bullets rode hot lines through the air above their heads. Sarah had been crawling, just like she taught the cadets today, through dirt so hot it burned through her gloves. Hawk was 20 meters ahead, dragging a wounded teammate toward cover. Then the RPG hit. For a moment, the world became nothing but light and noise and the sensation of being lifted and thrown like a ragdoll. When her hearing came back, ringing, distant, wrong, she found herself on her back, staring at a sky turned brown with dust. Hawk. She rolled over, ignoring the pain shooting through her ribs. Hawk. She found him half buried in debris, his vest shredded by shrapnel, blood spreading across his uniform in a bloom of dark red. Sarah ran. Not crawled, ran despite the bullets still snapping past. She reached him and dropped to her knees, hands already moving to apply pressure to the worst wounds. His eyes found hers. They were still clear, still alert, but she could see the light beginning to fade. "Hey," he said, his voice wet and weak. "Torres." "Don't," she started, but he cut her off with a slight shake of his head. "You get them home," he whispered, his fingers finding hers and squeezing with what little strength he had left. "Promise me. Get our guys home." "I promise," she choked out. "I promise, Hawk. But you're coming too. You hear me? You're—" His hand went slack in hers. Just like that. One moment he was there, David Hawkins, her friend, her brother in arms, and the next moment he was gone. Sarah had knelt there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, rain starting to fall from the dust-filled sky, mixing with the blood and tears on her face. Then training took over. She'd pushed the grief down into a locked box inside herself, secured Hawk's body, and led the rest of her team to the extraction point through 2 miles of hostile territory. She'd kept her promise. She'd gotten them home. All of them except Hawk. Back in her quarters at Riverside Academy, Sarah placed the photograph gently on the desk. Her thumb traced over Hawk's face, that bright, fearless grin. "Still keeping my promise?" she whispered to the empty room. "One cadet at a time." The rain continued its steady rhythm against the window. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the faint sounds of the base settling in for the night, doors closing, voices calling good night, the hum of generators. She closed the box carefully, pressed her palm flat against the lid for a moment, then locked it again. Tomorrow the training would continue. The cadets would test her again. And she would teach them what Hawk had taught her, that discipline isn't born in glory or comfort. It's forged in mud and blood and the willingness to keep moving forward when everything in you screams to stop. Sarah stood, walked to the window and looked out at the darkened training field. Somewhere out there, Jake Reynolds and the others were probably complaining about her, questioning her methods, still doubting her. That was fine. They'd learn. They always did. By the end of the week, the cadets were exhausted, bruised, humbled. But still, they didn't know the truth about their instructor. That changed on Friday morning. The announcement came over the base PA system at 0600. All cadets report to the main auditorium immediately following breakfast. Full dress uniform. This is not a drill. Speculation ran wild through the mess hall. Maybe we're getting deployed early? No way, we haven't even finished basic training. I heard it's about that new instructor. Maybe she's finally leaving. Jake sat with his breakfast tray, quieter than usual. His body ached from a week of brutal training, but more than that, something had been nagging at him. The way Mitchell moved. The way she anticipated everything. The absolute confidence that wasn't arrogance, it was certainty. He'd served under plenty of officers. None of them moved like her. At 0900 sharp, the cadets filed into the auditorium. 500 young men and women in crisp dress uniforms, filling the rows of seats. The buzz of conversation filled the air, too many questions, not enough answers. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell sat off to the side of the stage, in her service dress blues for the first time since arriving on base. The uniform was perfectly pressed, the ribbons on her chest arranged in neat rows, but from a distance, the details were impossible to make out. Colonel Davis stood at the podium, a thick folder in his hands. He waited for silence, his expression unusually serious. "Cadets," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the auditorium. "This morning's assembly is different from our usual briefings. For the past week, you've been training under Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. Some of you may think you know her." He paused, letting that hang in the air. "You don't." The whispers started immediately, but Davis silenced them with a look. "What I'm about to share with you is a matter of public record, though most of it was classified until recently." He clicked a remote. The massive screen behind him flickered to life. The gold Navy SEAL trident appeared first, gleaming against a black background. Below it, text began to scroll. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, Naval Special Warfare Command SEAL Team 2. The auditorium went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. More text appeared. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor Purple Heart. Navy Commendation Medal Combat Action Ribbon. 12 years active service, 4 combat deployments, Operation Desert Hawk, Operation Sentinel Dawn. Jake felt his stomach drop. Beside him, Marcus had gone pale. Holy shit, someone whispered behind them. Colonel Davis continued, his voice steady. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell is one of fewer than 50 women to have ever completed Navy SEAL training. She served with SEAL Team 2 for 8 years, leading multiple high-risk operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. The screen changed. Photos appeared. Sarah in full combat gear, face camouflaged, rifle at the ready, standing in desert terrain. Sarah kneeling beside a wounded soldier, applying pressure to a bleeding wound. Sarah with her team, all of them filthy and exhausted but alive. Operation Sentinel Dawn, Davis said, his voice taking on a tone of reverence. You may have heard of it. 6 years ago, a SEAL team was ambushed during an extraction in Afghanistan. They were outnumbered 10 to 1, trapped in a compound with limited ammunition and no air support. The screen showed grainy helmet cam footage. Gunfire. Explosions. Shouted orders barely audible over the chaos. The team was pinned down for 6 hours. 3 members were killed in the initial ambush. 2 more were critically wounded. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, then a lieutenant, took command when her team leader was hit. She coordinated the defense, called in air support, and personally dragged 2 wounded teammates through 2 miles of hostile territory to reach the extraction point. The footage showed a figure, smaller than the others but moving with relentless efficiency, pulling a wounded soldier through the dust while bullets kicked up dirt around them. For her actions that day she was awarded the Silver Star. The citation reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States." She saved 5 lives that day. The auditorium was so quiet that the hum of the projector seemed deafening. The woman some of you mocked for not looking like a warrior, Davis said, his voice hard now, is a warrior. The woman you thought was too soft, too small, too inexperienced, she's seen more combat than most of us will see in our entire careers. She's earned every bit of respect you should have given her from the beginning. He stepped aside. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, the floor is yours. Sarah stood and walked to the podium. Every eye in the auditorium tracked her movement. In her dress blues with the ribbons clearly visible on her chest, she looked like exactly what she was, a decorated combat veteran. She stood at the podium for a long moment, her eyes moving slowly across the sea of faces. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, but it carried weight. I know most of you didn't believe in me when I arrived, she began. You laughed. You doubted. Some of you thought I was a diversity hire or someone's friend who got a job they didn't deserve. A few cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I don't blame you, Sarah continued. You didn't know. And making assumptions based on appearances is part of human nature. But in combat, assumptions get people killed. She paused, her gaze finding Jake in the crowd. He couldn't look away. This week wasn't about proving myself to you. I have nothing to prove. I've already done the thing you're training for. I've been in the mud, under fire, carrying wounded teammates while bullets snapped past my head. I've made life and death decisions in fractions of seconds. I've lost friends I considered family. Her voice didn't waver, but something in her eyes darkened. The training I've put you through, the runs, the crawls, the rain, the exhaustion, that wasn't punishment. That was preparation. Because someday, some of you will find yourselves in situations where everything you thought you knew goes out the window. Where your strength fails and your confidence evaporates and all you have left is discipline. The screen behind her changed again, showing a team photo. Sarah in the center, surrounded by 5 other SEALs. One of them had his arm around her shoulder, a tall man with a bright grin even through the dust and exhaustion. Sarah's voice softened slightly. This was my team. My family. Chief Petty Officer David Hawkins, she pointed to the man with his arm around her, was my swim buddy, my teammate, my best friend. He died in my arms in Kandahar, telling me to get the rest of our team home safely. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Some cadets had tears in their eyes. I made him a promise that day, Sarah said quietly, that I would get them home. And I did. But more than that, I promised I would honor what he taught me by teaching others. By making sure that the next generation of warriors knows what real discipline looks like. What real strength is. She stepped back slightly from the podium. Real strength isn't about being the biggest or the loudest. It's not about never falling down. It's about getting back up every single time. It's about doing the right thing even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. It's about taking care of the person next to you even when you're barely able to take care of yourself. She looked directly at Jake again. When you pushed me down in the mud, Cadet Reynolds, you thought you were proving something. You weren't. You were revealing something about yourself, not me. You showed me exactly where you are in your journey. And that's okay. That's why you're here. To learn. Jake's face burned with shame, but he didn't look away. All of you are here to learn, Sarah continued, addressing the whole auditorium now. To be broken down and built back up stronger. To become not just soldiers but leaders. People that others can count on when everything goes to hell. She picked up a small object from the podium, her worn seal trident patch. This isn't just a badge. It's a promise. A promise that I will never quit, never leave a teammate behind, and never accept defeat. That's what I'm trying to teach you. Not how to crawl through mud, though that's useful, but what it means to make that promise and keep it no matter the cost. The screen went dark. Sarah stood alone in the spotlight. You wanted to know if I'm tough enough to train you, she said. The answer is yes. But the real question is, are you tough enough to learn? She stepped away from the podium. That's all. For a moment no one moved. Then slowly one cadet in the front row stood and began to clap. Then another. Then another. Within seconds the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding. Not the polite, obligatory clapping of a military ceremony, but genuine, thunderous applause born of respect and recognition. Sarah stood at attention, her face composed, and nodded once in acknowledgement. Jake found himself clapping harder than he'd ever clapped in his life, tears he didn't fully understand streaming down his face. The woman they'd pushed into the mud was a goddamn war hero. And they'd been too blind to see it. The final evaluation came 3 days later. The rain had stopped, but the field was still soft, still muddy, still unforgiving. The obstacle course stretched across half the base. Rope climbs, wall jumps, cargo nets, balance beams, and the dreaded 60-yard low crawl under barbed wire. All of it covered in mud. The cadets stood in formation at 0500, the pre-dawn darkness lit by floodlights that cast harsh shadows. They were nervous, exhausted from 3 more days of brutal training, but something had changed. The mockery was gone. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something harder to define: determination. Sarah faced them, hands behind her back, her voice carrying clearly in the cold morning air. This is your final evaluation, she said. It's not about time. It's not about individual performance. It's about teamwork. No one finishes alone. No one gets left behind. You move together or you fail together. Is that understood? Yes, ma'am. The response was unified, sharp, and genuine. Sarah's eyes moved across the formation. The moment one of you quits, everyone fails. The moment one of you gets left behind, everyone fails. This isn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about being a team. She paused. From this point forward, I'm not your instructor. I'm your teammate. I'll be running this course with you. If I fall, you help me up. If you fall, I'll help you up. That's how this works. A visible ripple went through the formation. Several cadets stood straighter. Form up in teams of 5, Sarah ordered. You have 2 minutes. The cadets scrambled to organize themselves. Jake found himself in a group with Marcus, 2 women named Rivera and Chin, and a quiet kid named Peters who'd struggled all week but never quit. Sarah positioned herself with a different group, the ones who'd struggled the most, who'd been slowest, who'd complained the loudest. The whistle blew. They surged forward into the course. The first obstacle was the rope climb, 30 feet straight up, then down the other side. Jake went first, his hands finding the rope, his body remembering the technique Sarah had drilled into them. Up and over. Then he waited at the bottom, holding the rope steady for Rivera. Come on, he shouted. You've got this. Rivera climbed, slower than Jake but steady. When she reached the top, she looked down, momentarily frozen. Don't look down, Marcus called. Look at where you're going. She descended and the rest of the team followed. Across the course, Sarah was climbing with her team. When Peters, who'd struggled with upper body strength all week, froze halfway up, Sarah climbed back down, positioned herself below him and called up encouragement. Use your legs, Peters. Your arms are just to hold on, your legs do the work. You've got this. Peters pushed through inch by painful inch and made it over. The course continued. Balance beams slick with mud. Wall jumps that required teamwork to scale. Cargo nets that tangled and trapped. Halfway through, Rivera slipped on a beam and fell hard, landing on her shoulder. She cried out in pain. Jake was there in an instant. Can you move it? She tested her shoulder, wincing. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Then we keep going, Jake said, offering his hand. Together. She took it and they moved forward. The low crawl came near the end. The same 60 yards of barbed wire and mud that had become infamous during the first week. Jake's team went first. They'd learned from watching Sarah. Elbows tucked, hips low, breathing controlled. They moved as a unit, calling out obstacles, warning each other about loose wire. When Peter started to panic halfway through, his breathing quickening, his movements getting sloppy, Jake crawled up beside him. Hey, Jake said, his voice calm. Look at me. Breathe. You've done this a dozen times this week. You know how. Just focus on the next pull. Just one more. Then one more after that. Peters nodded, got control of his breathing and continued. They emerged from the far end muddy, exhausted and together. Sarah's team came through next. She'd positioned herself in the middle, able to help those in front and behind. When one of her cadets, a guy named Morrison who'd been one of the loudest mockers that first day, got his pack caught on the wire, Sarah was there immediately. Stop moving, she said calmly. I'll get it. She reached up carefully, unhooked the strap from the barb and freed him. Thank you, ma'am, Morrison said, genuine gratitude in his voice. That's what teammates do, Sarah replied. Now move. The final obstacle was a sandbag carry, 60 pounds over 200 yards of muddy terrain. The cadets grabbed their bags and started moving. 50 yards in, Chin stumbled, her legs giving out. The bag hit the mud with a wet thud. Jake backtracked immediately. Come on, Chin. We're almost there. I can't, she gasped. My legs are done. Then I'll carry the bag, Jake said. You just keep walking. He heaved her bag onto his other shoulder, carrying two 60-pound bags, 120 pounds total. His legs screamed. His back felt like it was breaking. But he kept moving. Marcus saw what Jake was doing and backtracked to help Chin, lending her a shoulder to lean on. This is what it looks like. Sarah called out, running alongside them despite her own exhaustion. This is what teams do. The formation pushed through the final stretch, some cadets carrying 2 bags, others helping wounded teammates walk, everyone moving together through pain and exhaustion. They crossed the finish line as a group, muddy, trembling, barely able to stand but together. Sarah waited until the last cadet crossed the line, then walked to the front of the formation. She was covered in mud just like them. Breathing hard just like them. Recover, she said. For several minutes no one spoke. Just heavy breathing and the sound of rain beginning to fall again. Light this time, almost gentle. Finally Sarah spoke. You passed. Not because you're strong,